this evening. Is it on now? I sound the same. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, no wonder nobody was laughing yet at my jokes. I thought, oh, it's gonna be a tough crowd.
Yeah.
But to repeat my joke, I thanked you for allowing the silence to spread across the room, because I always find it a bit awkward to be like, okay, shush, we're starting. All this to say, thank you. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. My name is Maya. I'm showing up as several things at the moment, one being co-host. In a few seconds, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Sabina, who is another co-host. And we also have Grace, who is co-hosting our Zoom audience. So we have a great warmth of faces here in the room, but we also have some folks joining us remotely. I'm also showing up as an excited person to be in conversation with Nico, who is such a beautiful energy, and we're in for a real treat this evening. And I'm also showing up as the convener of conversations in contemporary art. So I'm just going to say a few very quick things about the platform, then hand over the microphone to Sabina, who is going to acknowledge territory and introduce Nico in some more detail. Then for a while, Nico and I are going to be in conversation about some images, some background stories on your work, things you've done and are doing and about to do.
Yes.
And then we are going to go into a Q&A discussion. So if there's anything that you would like to hear more about, you're very, very welcome to join in. That will probably start at around 7 o'clock-ish. So there's a good chance for chat. And then at close to 7:30, we're going to decant to the frigo vert and go to a mixer that the grad students are hosting. So lots of nice, like, continuous grad student hospitality for your alma mater, Nico. And yeah, continue to have some drinks and chat at frigo vert. So down to Sika. Conversations in Contemporary Art is a program of visiting speakers that started in around 2012. So we're in our youthful 10th anniversary this year. It's a platform that welcomes artists and curators and scholars, writers, to come and share reflections on their practice to yourselves. So Concordia students, faculty, local artists, and those who are interested and curious. So it's a nice opportunity for informal chats, sometimes in the form of artist talks, sometimes in the form of, like tonight, in discussion or dialogues and panels. And it's hosted in the MFA program here at Concordia University. So it's a really nice feature that is connected to the art school and allows for these conversations to happen alongside other things going on and around the program. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to Sabina to carry on. Thanks, Sabina.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you, everyone. So we would like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located in unceded indigenous lands. The Ganya-Gahaga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters in which we gather today. Jogjoge, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with indigenous and other peoples within Montreal community. Now I'm going to do introduction for Nico Williams, and thank you again, everyone, for coming here. So Nico is Anishinaabe and member of Amjinnon First Nation community. He's currently working in Jogjoge, Moningyang, Montreal. He has a multidisciplinary, often collaborative practice that is centered around sculptural beadwork. William is an active member in the urban Indigenous Montreal arts community, a board member of the Biennale d'Art Contemporain Autochtone, and a member of the Contemporary Geometric Beadwork Research Team. He has taught workshops at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, NSCAT University, the Indigenous Arts Center, Crow Indigenous Relations, Northern Affairs Canada, and Carleton University. His work has been shown internationally and across Canada. Williams' practice has been featured by National Geographic 2018 and CBC 2021, and is housed in prominent public collections, including Musée des Beaux-Arts de Montréal, Musée d'Art Contemporain de Montréal, the Art Gallery of Ontario, Archives National du Québec, the Ojibwe Cultural Foundation, and the Royal Bank of Canada Art Collection. His first public sculpture, Monument to the Brave, was commissioned in 2020 by the Sick Kids Foundation. His work has been supported by the Canada Council, Conseil des Arts de Montréal, Conseil des Arts et des Lettres du Québec, Impetus Grant, and the Ontario Arts Council and the Fleurhof Artist Grant. So we welcome Nico and thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that intro. Your bio just keeps getting longer, so I hope you don't mind each time you do a talk, Nico.
Yeah, no, that's so fabulous. And yeah, there's so many projects that are going on, and it's been a like great journey, like having to meet all these like wonderful curators and artists and work with different colleagues and stuff throughout that path.
I realized I forgot the clicker. I wasn't commanding you. Like, okay, and here's that.
Okay, so we'll talk about this beaded.
So
Net.
we had this plan to be in this conversation about various slides. Some slides Nico is expecting, some slides Nico is not. So there's going to be a fresh reaction to the images, but this one Nico is expecting. And you just started off talking about, you know, the richness of your schedule at the moment. And part of that is the you're being awarded the Bronfman Fellowship for 2021.
Yes.
And one of the things that SICA hosts each year is the Bronfman Fellow. So it was really wonderful to see you get that award. And then I thought, yes, Nico and I get to plan something together for Conversations in Contemporary Art. So maybe this is one of the first pieces that we can discuss together.
Yeah, well, this is like every year I'm making sort of a beaded portrait of myself and like experiences that I have of that year. And it's like on an ID card, which is like an Indian status card issued by the government of Canada. And I remember when I first started making the first, I think there's like 5 now, I've done like 5 years. And like this year, the new card was Parle Français, because it was like me holding up a rib because I had that surgery at Rosemont Hospital. And they wanted me to speak French. So they'd be like, Parle Français. And it was just like a nightmare for like 7 days in there. But this was like a really like happy moment. And, you know, the Bronfman really brought opportunities of like being able to have like a studio nearby and like, you know, be able to continue exciting projects. And, you know, I wore this hat that had beadwork by Jean Marshall on it. And I'm currently in an exhibition with her right now in Radical Stitch at the Art Gallery of Hamilton. And, you know, I put the hat there on, even though you can't see the beadwork, but she put it on the back of it, like on the side. So that's how she wanted it. So I thought it was fun. And then you have this sort of like wonky, excited expression, you know, looking back at you. You know, there's always sort of like a humor that's going on with it. And like, you know, you only have like a very small little like cubic square place to put all these like beads, and like you have to really pick the right sort of pixels, I'd say, or, you know, fragments to put the expression and the shading in it. So this was like an exciting, like, yeah, and it was called Rock On. And I put the Bronfman there so you knew it was the Bronfman year, yeah.
The Bronfman year.
The Bronfman. Yeah.
But speaking of Rock On, I mean, maybe the 2 things that will come up with some of the other pieces that we're going to talk about is the titling and how you index humor.
Fun.
Yes, absolutely. But also in this case, literally the Rock On, and you referenced, you know, the collaborators and people that you're in connection with and in community with in the hat, that you just came from Hamilton to be here.
Yes.
Literally 10 minutes before we put the projector
Oh,
up.
yes.
So do you want to say a little bit about the Rock On context of your day even?
Oh yeah, it was like, it was so lovely. Like I went there to go meet the curators, Michelle, Sherry, and Kathy. And, you know, they have over 30 beadwork artists from all over Turtle Island, which is nice. And we're all, you know, exploring the materials of beads in so many different ways, you know. And like, you know, I was doing this interview with the television broadcast local station there. And they always like go to like, oh, so are you like doing traditional like, you know, Native American beadwork sort of stuff? And I was like, oh my gosh, we're light years, you know, like with all the stuff that we're bringing. Yeah, have you been to the exhibition? You know, and they're looking for like traditional, but you know, it's sort of like interwoven in all of our practices, you know, how we're using that material and the topics that we're talking about, you know, and then you'll have pieces that, you know, touch on mourning, or you'll have pieces that look at like Indigenous futures. So it's kind of interesting to see all of that together in that space. And then, yeah, so I drove here from Hamilton, yeah, had to do the fast route. And, you know, coming in, I was like getting on the island and you just see like this crystal glass of red, you know, all the little red lights, like the backs of cars. I was like, okay, and there is the cab bus line, and I'm just gonna cruise on there, you know. And I just came all the way down. I was like, commute auto, it's sort of like a taxi. I can do this, you know.
You know who I am. I
have to get to the Sikatok. Yeah. So
we would have vouched for you.
Yeah. And Catherine Blackburn was also in town last night.
Beautiful.
So it's good to, and Shelley Nero. So this was like really great to see like community come together, and you know, exhibition opportunities like this. It's very special.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we'll be returning to some of the work that's on that show for more images and context.
Yeah.
So another image, I couldn't resist of including this one in our slideshow, and it's going to bookmark a few more slides that talk a little bit about work that you were doing in 2021-ish into 2022 of found objects rendered in beading with different techniques. What was going on behind the smile at the time of this photograph?
Well, actually, that envelope has all the cereal boxes or the lotto tickets, or like, you know, the original object that I was responding to. Like even the original scratch ticket that I found out front of the VA, or the one that Nadia had given me with like the berry on it. I think you have an example of that. And, you know, I moved to Hochelaga and my studio was on St. Catherine Street, like a rougher sort of part of St. Catherine when you go down. And it's just like covered in all this, you know, sort of like garbage. So I was picking up those objects and then, you know, beating them or trying to look at ways to explore them or the textures, you know. And yeah, that's like my little package of like wonderful things that we're working on in the studio.
Yeah, of the source material.
Yes, and there's the J-cloth that inspired the J-cloth.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is J-cloth number 3.
Yeah. Well, I was reading an article that had a few quotes between you in conversation with Leonard Bunkman of CBC.
Yeah.
And he seemed to be interested in the use of humor, not only in the titles. So here's an example that we foreshadowed coming back to humor in your titling, but also in the use of everyday sort of mundane objects, but with a labor intensive practice.
Oh yeah. Like with this, well, like this work is so funny because when it was installed in Vancouver, they had a giant plinth, okay, with like this big glass box on top of it. And the lighting was down on it. So like when you saw it, it literally looked like this dirty cloth that cleaned all the dust up. And then people were walking by it. And then this lady came up to me and was like, Nico, they forgot to put your work in there. It's like, I was like, yeah, you know, this is funny because it's called Bang On Man. Because like somebody came into my studio, they saw, they're like, yeah, bang on, man, you got it. You know, and that's the moment that I had also. So I love the title and it just worked. And I was like, no, actually all that's beaded. So then when we went in front of that object, you can, you know, connect to it in different ways. And it's just like having fun with it. Yeah.
This is one of my favorite detail images from our slideshow. And you really had to look at it to see how you detailed the dirt, which is paint.
Yes.
Right? And if you, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Nico, but
this is the first work I've ever painted. Might be first and last, but I don't want to be quoted on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So don't quote the artist.
Yeah, don't quote me on that. It's like first and last might be.
You said it was the third J-cloth you've
Yes,
done.
this is the third, because I'm exploring ways to you know, play around with like the patterns on it. And so like the first one is like the clean, like like grandma's sink version. It was inspired by my grandma's kitchen sink, and it's just like a solid blue cloth. And then the second one is sort of like this other milky stain where I was sort of trying to think about picking up different particles. And then this one is sort of like the uncle in the garage, you know, like we'll have like the deer like hanging up, like, you know, from hunting, and you'll have the car getting repaired, and then you have sort of this oily rag sort of like there to clean up the oil on the car. Yeah.
So the way that you're using this material is referencing like kin and community in so many different ways.
Well, nostalgia, like, you know, I think about my experiences like on the res growing up, and I think of that garage, and I think of that, you know, the cars getting repaired, and then the deers getting skinned, and then freezing, you know, the meat in freezers in the same space. Do you know what I mean? So you'd have like this auto sort of thing happening. It was a big garage, and then you have the deers getting ready, you know, to be packaged and stuff.
And the J Cloth sees it all.
And the J Cloth, yeah, maybe I'll make like a new version. Yeah, but you forgot about the deer. I'm just kidding. The venison.
I included these images in our PowerPoint as well to give you an idea of, I mean, if we could swap from the collected items here, you can see the cereal box poking out. Probably has no idea how lucky it's about to be.
Oh yeah,
immortalized here.
that's them.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the packaging and those indexes, but also the way that you are working with pattern? I mean, what's the process here?
Yeah, well, for this work, I was thinking a lot about basketry. I was thinking about you know, ash baskets and reusing baskets that would be passed down. And then I was like looking at all these sort of like temporary inked out versions made from trees, you know, like paper and all that. And I was like, wait a minute, like, you know, we're recycling these objects or throwing them at the curb. I found that one at the curb. Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna get into the story. Anyways, at least something
on
good.
Instagram.
Something good. Oh, did I write about it? I forgot about that. So
So much you dropped the microphone.
I know. Whoops. So anyways, yeah, I thought about, you know, food sovereignty for these pieces. I thought about, you know, the land transforming and, you know, all those resources coming in and commodities and commercialization of, you know, farmland that is indigenous land and getting packaged up into these little boxes that, you know, you need dairy to activate it. You have to like activate those with milk. So instead of like stitching the beads onto something traditional like deer skin or moose, I put it on cow skin. And I really thought about the whole experience of the piece, you know, and with the sugary ones, I used a child's plastic bead. I don't use plastic often, but for the sort of Kellogg's one, even coming from London, Ontario, we have like the Kellogg's factory. So it's like still going to that nostalgia, those moments of nostalgia. And then like the KD, I decided to do like the creamy cheese and like this like 24 karat gold, sort of highlighting, you know, the importance of that like dairy for people, you know, just thinking about them. And we're even working on new things. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't get into that right now. But yeah, this is Kellogg's and KD. Yeah.
That adds another layer to how I think you're perhaps working with value in some of these pieces, because you talked about nostalgia and that has like a semantic emotional value,
Yeah.
but then the value of in terms of affordability of foods. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned the detail of the KD with some of the beads in gold, and then with Kellogg's Pop some in plastic, because there's this presumption that these fast foods are available, but they're not necessarily, because they're tied to access. And as you say, histories and generations of food sovereignty and
Well,
determination
the
of nutrition.
farmlands, like even when you're driving through Ontario, you just see it, like all those old growth trees are all torn up, like all the original plants that would have been there are gone, they're cleared. You know, they've paved a route to grow wheat and corn and all that stuff. which corn is an indigenous one, but, you know, thinking of like, you know, more the wheat, I was like looking
Yeah,
towards.
yeah, absolutely. And then the pulp paper to make the packaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, I love
And
this one.
I included this one because, well, you go for it.
Well, you know, this one's called Stash Bag. And I was also thinking about, you know, sort of aunties using them as purses, like on like back home, you know, like just stashing everything in it. Like even like when I was going out to Hamilton, I like put everything in a Ziploc bag. You know, I had like my cologne in there, my like toothbrush is just like a Ziploc bag. Do you know what I mean? And then I thought about I wanted to have like another version of it too. And you know, the lighter's there to sort of like think about what's going in that stash bag, a trash bag. Ooh, the sneak peeks, trash bag. Anyways, no, not in this presentation. But yeah, for this work, I wanted to look at another form of, you know, basketry and holding. You know, I was thinking of like ways to explore that. I'm so interested in these objects, things that hold and what you can put in them. And I think the title leads the mind to where I'm going with this work. I don't want to say what it's supposed to represent, but Stash Bag, the lighter, I think you know the direction of the work. Yeah.
It's also such a beautiful piece aesthetically with the material of the beading.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious when you're planning a piece, is there a certain amount of like modeling experimentation before you then make the whole thing? You're doing little samples.
Yes. If Sam is in the audience, I don't know if Sam's here right now.
Maybe
So
on Zoom.
I have a bunch of studio tech teams that I work with, like, and they're so great, these people. And if Sam were here right now, like, he's always like, you got to do the test. You got to test. I don't test. I'm dribbling around constantly. I'm like, okay, we're gonna do Ziplocs. We're gonna try cereal box. We're gonna do shorts. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just running around and like, I'll come back from like a lunch break and I'll like have like a piece of garbage in my hand. I'm like, we can do this, you know? And we're gonna make it beautiful. Like the objects that I am picking, they do have like a relationship and a dialogue between like colonial and indigenous relations. And yes, we do tests now sometimes. Now, I don't know, there's like a piece coming up that I just sort of like, it's gonna work, you know, and sometimes it does work. But yeah, we do little samples sometimes, yeah, too.
Test when necessary.
Sometimes, yeah.
So quick sidebar, perhaps, because you're now also teaching.
Yes.
Which is something that comes along with the Bronfman Fellowship,
Yeah.
getting to teach a class here at Concordia. What would you say to your students about testing and prototyping?
Well, I'm encouraging them to do sort of this like research, you know, creation, concept to realization sort of process. You know, it's like, okay, you know, try it. They'll be like, we're gonna go big, but you know, then they'll show up and it's small. But you know, just as long as they're making and trying, that's all I want to see, you know.
Yeah, so testing is also a form of trying, and you have the idea that you say you're dribbling around, but then you have a sense of like, oh, this is going to be the thing that we materialize.
Well, we also render it on the computer too. And so I know that is going to work. Flat surfaces, we're able to get that nailed down. But when we start doing things that move or fold or sort of hold, oh yes, this work. This is a beaded bubble wrap texture. Yeah. This took a year and it was inspired by the Amazon bag that I was holding in my hand. And this work, yeah, it took us a year, and it was also inspired by bandolier bags because I was trying to think about a traditional object and sort of like indigenizing that object and thinking about, you know, carrying around things. And, you know, lots of smiles were littered around during the pandemic. And, you know, people were ordering all these things like food boxes and packages, and you just would see it everywhere. So literally
Hoarding thing.
all my all my materials that I was inspired by. I was like, come here, I'm gonna make you into something. And this one was having fun. And then I fell in love with the texture of the bubble wrap. And at first we were gonna make it in an envelope, and then I was like, no, let's try to play around with it. Let's try to make it weird. Let's have fun, So that work is on view right now at Radical Stitch. And 4 of us worked on it over a year. So if I was alone, it would have taken me like 4 years to bead. Do you know what I mean? But it's like we condensed it down to one.
Yeah, and absolutely something to
Because
underscore.
beadwork takes time.
Yes,
It takes
absolutely.
a lot of time and precision. Yeah.
Yeah, and something to underscore with the dimensions of looking at this on screen, that it's so much detail is lost in the digital images. We have some dimensions on the slides, but hopefully the detail comes through as as documentation of that incredible labor.
Yes, and this family drove from Thunder Bay to Regina to see this bag. Like, this was incredible. When they showed up to see that bag, they're like, can we get a picture with you in the bag? I was like, yes, let's go right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, you drove so far. And then Jean had heard that and then gifted, they're quill workers, but gifted the youngest daughter this bead kit that is like super like, decked out. Like, you want these kits. It has like all the colors, all the scissors you need, because they traveled so far to see that. So that was like incredible I hope that she's beading. She might be quilling. Like, yeah, quill work
Or
is.
both ends.
Yes, it's
for-
like quill workers, bead workers. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
For context, this was for the opening of Radical Stitch, which was at the Mackenzie Art
Yes.
Gallery, and it's been traveling.
Yes, it's just traveled to Hamilton, and then it's going to be traveling to Thunder Bay next.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Yes.
And a catalog is coming out for Radical Stitch.
I believe so, yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
wow, it's so incredible, like, to see all those works. Yeah, in person.
So the next image, I forgot I put that in there, a better detail of the dimensional,
Look at
the
those.
dimensional works.
Yeah, so when you're like beading, like, you're literally looking at the material like that. It's like so precious and shiny, and like, it was very fun to do. Yeah.
So speaking of shows, the next few slides document some of the installation pieces that you've done.
Yeah.
This one, a local installation from the Musée des Beaux. I should correlate those two. Yes, the Musée d'Art Contemporain.
Yep.
This is from 2021, and the install has a series of your bingo cards and mots cachés.
Yeah.
Which you've been working on for a couple of years and was something you were working on when you and I first met.
Yes. So this is so perfect because I had done an independent study that summer, like when the pandemic started, and you and we workshopped the mot caché. Like, I remember just like, we'd do all these readings and I'd like, bounce all these ideas and all these words. And then I started pulling words from it. Do you know what I mean? So this is so crazy that actually, like, it became like, it developed into like these works that have such, powerful meanings behind them. Like, the bingo ones were the first ones, and those were done in a studio in Saint Henri by the RCA building. And there was no crosswords yet, or, that's not in there yet. And I was just exploring using color and trying to communicate different sort of meaning using just, winning patterns. And I tried to also play with, going back to the bingo hall and that sort of culture too. And then this object, I feel, relates to other people also when they're in front of it. You get that nostalgia. You remember seeing them every time you go to a debonair, like debonair culture, you see it. And the reason why I kept them all attached like this as one is because when I first moved to Saint Henri like 12 years ago, I'm in Hochelaga now, love Hochelaga. I saw these rolls of tickets. I don't know if they still keep them as rolls, but I remember seeing them as rolls when I first moved here. So I wanted to go back to that moment, And I think, yeah, with the crosswords that we had worked on, like through like text, like I think I was sending you like writing and all that stuff. That was such a wonderful summer.
Yeah, we were having nice conversations over Lee Maricle's writing.
Yes,
and
yes, rest
talking
in
about
peace.
language and index. Yeah.
Yes. And, you know, even the red one here, well, Nadia had given me that ticket a long time ago. And I was like, what the heck? And she was like, it'll make sense someday. And I was like, okay. I think she even forgot giving it to me. And I was like, you know,
And here it is.
and here it is. Yeah. I still have that in the Amazon bag or the Amazon, the pouch. Yeah, it's very cool. And it's funny because like my name is Damon. Like my Instagram, it's like with the O and it means heartberry. So I think she's very like clever with that stuff. So the berry up there was just like doink.
Oh yeah, it was prophetic, absolutely.
And you know, these we had workshops. So it's like there's all different sort of histories in these, and it's like sort of scratching away histories. Like we have like the Dudley George incidents when Mike Harris said, get the effing Indians out of the park. So I had that there, but it's like the Ipperwash crisis. I'm looking at, you know, that very sacred land and, you know, these people that are moving in and, you know, shooting somebody for holding a flashlight. Do you know what I mean? When it's ridiculous. And I think we got down to there where it was like diaspora moving forward in poor together, because like, you know, that's sort of a way of like the future. Like we're all here. Do you know what I mean? We need to build relationships and establish those relationships, but also remember those histories. You know, when you go out to those shorelines where you're vacationing, like those are indigenous lands, you know? So it's like, there's like fun and play. And then I think also with the needles, yeah, I wanted to think about my grandmother when she went to residential school and she would get needles stuck in her tongue for speaking Anishinaabe. So it says take away language in French, lang or tongue, I think, Anishinaabe, needles. But you can sort of move it around. And she was from Kettle Point, so I put thunder there because they have like the kettles out there, like from the Thunderbird eggs. Yeah, so it's pretty loaded, those tickets. And it's so funny because I was in New York and there was somebody has the blue one and oh, I don't know. Do you have the blue one? I don't know. Yeah, the blue one here, the Gotchman family. And I was sitting there with Becky talking about the work and she didn't even know. And it was like so loaded. Like she just loved the beauty of the work. And then when we actually went into the text of the work, she was like, holy smokes, this is like so loaded, you know?
Yeah, maybe we could have a moment to talk about that and the legibility of work and when you want to or choose not to extend explanatory commas to things that you're referencing in works like Ipperwash, Dudley.
Dudley George.
Yeah, and I remember when we were workshopping some of the words, also talking about the double meanings of things. Like you mentioned,
just
belonging
playing
in language and tongue.
Yeah.
And that will be legible to some folks, and of course, not others.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to share how you negotiate that? Because I know that there's some folks in the audience who are also thinking about that with their own practices and what is for community, and when like you want your audiences to do the work to meet you where you're at, because you're protecting your constituency as well, and like standing in their sovereignty.
Like explaining the work to people, or
yeah, sorry, that was like,
well, I think,
but I guess the question is, you know, the explanatory comma, like you mentioned this conversation when you were at Forge Project New York and storytelling, things behind the work that someone else didn't necessarily read or grasp.
Yeah.
And are there moments where like
they just grasp the beauty of the object?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and then when we went into like the layers of like, you know, behind it, it just really opens up. And each work has very many layers that I'm presenting. At first it is playful, but when you go in, like when you go deeper into the work, more things come out of it. And, you know, if I'm there to explain it, yeah, but I think that I hope the work can explain itself. And I don't know, I just expect people to like fall in love with the material too, like bringing beads off the body and bringing them into a space where people are experiencing different, you know, moments.
Yeah, and
a big thing.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that's so
But
clever
this you
about
can read
it.
stuff. Do you know what I mean? I
Well,
was like,
exactly,
and then I was
yeah,
reading it, and I was like,
sure.
yeah, it's a C. Do you know what I mean? And like playing around with all that stuff, you know? So like that's a little easier. And yeah, that's so great. Yeah.
So speaking of your grandma and
Yeah.
storytelling, I'm glad that you agreed that we could put this in the slideshow because this is
Yeah.
one of my favorite pieces of yours.
I love
So,
it. Yeah.
yeah, let's hear a little bit about Grandma Sadie's potato.
Okay, so this is one of the works I created actually when I was in MFA here at Concordia. And I was trying to think, you know, taking the patterns off because I was doing geometric forms with all these patterns. And I tried to think about, you know, making objects that could just, you know, speak and represent an experience that I had in the past. And this work is supposed to be a potato that's cut in half with a television cable coming out of it. Because I know everybody, I love this work. Like I keep it like in my studio and everybody's like, oh, is this like, no. Do you know what I mean? I was just like, no. Because I had that moment with my grandma Sadie and we would cut a potato in half and then throw it around the room to get different television stations attached to a freaking cable to the TV with like, yeah, it was just great. If we wanted to get like something in Detroit, we'd throw the potato like that way and it like, you know, it would get different like TV receptions.
It's a whole wordplay on the hot potato.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it would shrivel up though, but you just cut another potato and stick it in, you know, but and this one is a little more, you know, it's not going to shrivel up.
Oh,
no.
Prosperity potato.
And I used copper beads for this, you know, because I wanted to think about, you know, resources. Yeah.
It's in the slideshow as a lead into some of your other geometric shapes. We're just going to talk about a few. And because you've mentioned when we were planning this chat that you're doing less of it at the moment.
Oh yeah.
But such a beautiful
piece this work is in Radical Stitch, and it's one of the earlier works that I had created. And this was sort of explaining all these sort of like Anishinaabe teachings I had growing up. Like the figures up there, actually, I pointed it out to Michelle Lavallee, and she was like, what are those? I was like, those are little people stealing socks. Do you know what I mean? Like I tried to like up there, like, and they're sort of like with their arms going wild. You know, I wanted to go to things my grandmother would tell me or go to her community. Like the cross over there is at the Kettle Point where all these round spheres in the water. A lot of people have taken them now, but there's all these like rock formations that are perfect spheres on the water. And then they put a cross up there. Do you know what I mean? It's so weird. Like, why do they put crosses up at like sacred, you know, indigenous sites all the time? Like, even I went to like the Devil's Bowl this morning in Hamilton, and there's a giant cross. And I was like, I'm sure this is like a super important indigenous space. And they've put a cross up. And then
Montreal.
yes, you know what I mean? Just the whole thing, you know, unseated, you know, just island. Let's take it. Let's take. Yeah, and then I have like a morning ceremony too with a figure by the water offering berries that they would put there during sort of like a funeral. Yeah. So these were like, this was before the MFA, and I was just pouring beads out, thinking about sort of a story. And then I'm just, you know, I had 3 weeks and it was 52,000 beads. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I'd just be in this like,
This was a 3-week project?
this was 3 weeks, yeah. And it's like this size. And I would just pour all the colors and I was like, go, 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 go. I was like, okay, and this is becoming a sad little figure right now with the by the water. You know what I mean? I'd be like, let's throw some strawberries down there. Like that's a lot of it. Yeah, this was crazy. This was like really playing with my brain on how to draw, because I do use the computer now to get like the really intricate things, but this was like no computer, just pouring beads down like this snowshoe with Aurora Borealis. I was like, okay, that purple looks like a sky. Do you know what I mean? And just seeing what these colors, like these glass materials, could really represent or become, you know? And it was sort of like drawing with beads at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that answered the question I was about to pose was, you know, you might had this image of pouring the beads onto your working space and
never
that would then
knew.
feed into how the
Yeah.
pattern manifest.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the bingo lady, she's on the top. She's the best. Yeah, we only have one picture of it. You have to see the work in person because this is the only image that exists of it. But it's really beautiful. You have 20 different little
It's an amazing
stories.
scale.
Yeah. And this one is also in Radical Stitch, one of the earliest works. Yes, the Indian's Frozen Computer. This was sort of me trying to figure out how to make patterns and, you know, forms. And on the side is beautiful quill work. Yes. And birch bark that I harvested from this really sketchy tree app in Montreal called like Tree Finder or something. And I went to this like, I know, because I needed to find birch. And I was like, I want
Stop
to,
the recording.
I know, yeah, I know. I get a bill like from the city. They're like, oh, Nico, so you actually took that little slice of birch out, you know? And I was like trying to like relearn basketry. Okay. I wanted to make quill boxes forever. I actually learned how to make quill boxes from this lady out in the Georgian Bay. Her name's Tracy Powis. And I had to go over like the Christmas break and rent a hotel. And I would show up at her house at 8 in the morning and then leave at 4 for a week. And then she taught me how to do a quill box. And it takes so much labor and time. And after learning that, well, I had to like help her fix her car. Like there's reciprocity. So I like gave cash to like repair her car. And then we like really connected over that period and got to like hear all these wonderful stories about how her family, if they needed to get braces for like a sister, they would make like 50 quill boxes or something, like because it was such a like a thriving industry in the past when we had an abundance of resources and all that knowledge. And you know, now a lot of that is lost. And I still do workshops. And I remember I was teaching quill work and somebody came up because her grandmother was a very important quill worker, but never taught anybody. And she was like, thank you for passing this on. I'm like, well, knowledge is here to give and, you know, pass on to another, but to take those things and, you know, lose it. So this work, I wanted to sort of, you know, be thankful for learning those techniques. And so I kept it in with a geometric form. And then that's my mouse clicker. I was like on this auction site and I like was looking at this like beaded bag. I have the thing at my house and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get that. But I was like this like, you know, super broke bead artist. And I was like, click. And I was like, oh no, I didn't actually meant to bid on it. My computer froze. And then all of a sudden it was like, congratulations, Nico Williams. You won this like ancient bag, you know? It's really cool. I do love that bag. And so I just put a little of the patterns on the side and then like morphed it around a bit. And that's my mouse clicker. That's my Mac like bar window
Right,
up
perfect.
there. Yeah. Yeah.
That captures a moment.
Yeah. It captures the moment. Yeah. I have the bag. Yeah. Yeah, that's also on view at Radical Stitch.
Mhm.
Yeah, the geometric stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, we're going to come
It's a
back
vibe.
to an image of some
Mhm.
photographs of this piece that you've installed with also having the three-dimensional object. Oh, it's right here.
Oh, yeah,
This is
that's the
an older
beginning.
photograph,
Where
but
did you find this? You
making a
did.
slideshow, I was doing
No,
some deep diving on
you did
on
deep
people's
diving.
Instagram
Wow.
and the internet. But yeah, so this is an image from the Schuken Gallery.
Yes.
I included this because you're making some interesting install decisions.
Yes, this is the very
Of
first.
like small works, well, you know,
Yeah.
like the intricate beadwork, which have a particular scale and they're on plinths, as you can see, but then large scale photographs as well.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that decision and
Well,
experimenting with other ways of engaging with these pieces?
I wanted people to like be able to see the details, you know? So I blew them up. I tried it and then I didn't really like that direction of blowing them up. So I just like stopped doing the blow up thing. I think I donated the middle piece to a Native Friendship Center where they do
Okay.
beading now. So they have that giant thing to be like, oh, someday, you know, like
It's like it's taking up the space. There's something about this.
yes, it took up too much space. And I think beadwork, I've also started taking the top, like the plexi tops off the beadwork. I want it to breathe, you know? So when I'm looking at this, it's on plinths. It's like, you know, boxed in. You have these works that are like sort of, you know, photographed. I don't know. I don't really connect with this way of like how it's installed. Yeah. And I think, you know, at least I tried it out and then, you know, now we're taking the plexi top off. We're letting the beadwork breathe.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're like, Nico, no, we have to cover that. Do you know what I mean? I was like, no, yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, you can see from this photograph as well that it's the reflections make it difficult to see. but-
Yeah, and you can't
Yeah.
get close. Yeah. Yeah. This is oh yes, and this
So
is
speaking
more
of different
recent.
install decisions, yeah, so you'll
We're outside now.
this is not a curatorial or not a chronological order of slides. That's intentional.
Yeah.
We're, you know, cyclical time, but I also was hoping to draw you out in some of these juxtapositions because even though there's just a few years difference, the curatorial install and aesthetics of these are very, very different.
Yeah.
So all the things you were just saying about wanting to try different things with install, we then see this, which was last year at Nuit Blanche in Tagaronto, Toronto.
Yeah.
And it's outside. And would you like to tell us a little bit about the experience of this install and all of the other factors that come into
Oh my-
public art outside?
Yes. Wow. Okay. The city of Toronto, hardcore. I love them though. But
Stop
it's,
the recording again.
yes. Can we pause again? This was okay. So the rocks. Let's just start with the rocks, okay? Because I'm still a caretaker of those rocks. Those rocks
I
are
was wondering
traveling
where
everywhere.
they live. Yeah.
They are from the territory there. They are Anishinaabe rocks. And that's cool because I was with Carolyn Monet and we were like looking at the rocks and she's like, oh yeah, the clay and the sand there, these are the rocks, you know? So I wanted to get rocks because where I grew up, there was a bunch of them on the shoreline and I just wanted to sort of make like a small sort of like vacation home-esque Great Lake front sort of installation. And we did it like a giant beaded medallion. And it's so funny because the city of Toronto was like, we need to get volunteers to help you for this because I just got done my surgery. I wasn't allowed to move anything. So they put it a post and they're like, come polish gemstones with Nico Williams. Okay.
Was it advertised like an event?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the people that knew what it was, they didn't show up. So two elderly ladies in their like 70 to 80s came and they were like, we thought we were going to be polishing like tiny things. This giant truck shows up. This giant truck. Yeah, they looked at my work and they're like, oh my gosh, it's going to be like tiny little sparkly things, you know? We have the tiny sparkly things on top of the rocks. But anyways, this truck comes and just dumps like, I think it was 4,000 pounds of rocks or 8,000 pounds of rocks. Yeah, oh my gosh. Those rocks, I'm like shipping them around right now and like they have to get shipped again. And yeah, thinking about, having your materials wait, because Toronto is like, oh, I had a production budget to install it, rent the generator and all that stuff. And then so like everything was done and I'm used to shipping beads all the time, right? And then they were like, did you factor in your shipping costs of the rocks? And I was like, what do you mean shipping costs of the rocks? So we had to like power wash those rocks. And there was so much labor that went into that because it's a perfect medallion, where we started with a center bead, but it's a stone on the base, and then did it out sort of like a rosette style. And then we placed tiny little rocks to make it look like it's like a little more organic. But it is a giant beadwork medallion, sort of, inspired by. And after all that labor, I was like, we're keeping the rocks. So anyways, now I know about shipping and weight and, great shipping companies in Montreal, Jajage, who can really help with that stuff. And, getting, a material from, the land near there was really important to me too. And then bringing these sort of, beadworks and placing them on top was also a new way of experiencing it. Like even the net was beaded. I was like, do we put like a water bottle in there, or do we just leave it a mystery? And then we have sort of these nationalistic flags that are all having a conversation with each other and excluding people from the outside. You have, they all have names. I don't know if you got the names of the chairs, but anyways, the best part,
Sorry.
the best part
Here's
is
a
the Quebec
detail.
one is called La Belle Province because it did not become a full country in the end, but I called it La Belle Province because it was a part of like the relationships that had happened with the Great Lakes and Anishinaabe communities. And we pulled out beadwork from the drawers of museums that summer, and we documented and we tried to keep like track of where the communities are, but a lot of the museums are just like, Indigenous beadwork, but they're not saying Indigenous beadwork. They're saying like, taken from this lady. You know what I mean? It's like, who made it? You know what I mean? So we have drawers of them. So we started to pull out the drawers, and it was great to do the tracing. So we have like documents of the work and where they are, but we don't have the maker, and that was like an awkward part too, having to deal with that. But I just wanted to what kind of vibes do you get from this? It's not a celebration.
No.
But I think some people take it as a celebration too. Like the drunk people in Toronto would be like, oh yeah, the Canada chair. But then when you look at it deeper, you can see that there's something going on.
Absolutely.
That's very
Absolutely.
serious.
And especially with the framing of it within Nuit Blanche, which is like party art night.
Yeah.
And
then you have this
people are-
heavy piece all night.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that lends to like how smart your install choices are and the titling, because the trespassing is like, well, who's trespassing where?
Oh my God, it took forever to think of that title. Oh my gosh. It's like, what are we gonna call it? Yeah.
And this was also around the time where you were experimenting a little bit with augmented reality and the O Canada project, which was drawing on the patterning that we see here on the Canadian chair. We don't have an image of that in this particular slideshow, but it was also included in part of Nuit Blanche, which is another dimensional layering of trespassing and augmented reality, which, the puns are
Did you try it out?
I didn't.
You can just do it on your phone. It's so weird. Yeah. And then you have these little balls that sort of just spin, and it's like it all folded into, these little, augmented reality thing. I'm trying. That was weird. I was like, oh, this is weird too. I like beads.
Maybe not today.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna keep trying. I like trying things, trying new things. Yeah. Yeah.
So we have. Oh yes, I included this for more detail of the of the images, but also so it was
The
commissioned
rocks
for
had
Nuit
been
Blanche.
transported.
This is it. Yeah. So you're
This was
installing
in
this inside
Chijage.
also.
Yeah, yeah. I moved those rocks, and now this is getting installed in Sarnia, Ontario. I'm flying there, I guess, because I have to do something else after to do an install, and then I have to go back in May for the opening. But yeah, they're like, yeah, do you want to like come and install these rocks that have just came to the gallery? And I was like, yeah, for sure. I'm gonna come and install that rock again. And it's coming somewhere super special soon, where I'm gonna have to reinstall the rocks again. Yeah. Those rocks are moving. Yeah.
But I don't mean this to be an overreach, but there's something interesting about how they're now part of like the provenance and having to think about the
Yeah.
shipping rates of it. Like there's still that play of like
Oh,
these are
there's
rocks from land, and now it's part of this network of the art world.
Yeah.
But you're insisting on that continuity.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's oh
Oops,
yes,
sorry.
team photos.
I'm not sure
Yay.
you're happy on that.
This is so good. Yeah.
We're getting towards the end of our slides. We realize it's 7. This is
Yeah.
moving so fast.
I know.
But a few slides of, you know, the what happens to bring all of this work to show.
Yeah.
So we have a few slides of the team. So
Yes.
as you talk through,
Yeah,
I'll click away.
absolutely. Like Aiden is now carving out in the West Coast, which is really great, you know, like he wanted to start carving, and you know, Aiden is C, and that's Sam.
Yes.
Sam knew we were having a photo shoot, so he like put on his like gummy worm shirt that day because we're hand stitching all these sick kid beads to this monument to the brave. And it's all woven out of plastic. There was so much plastic. I'm like, oh yeah, so it smelled like plastic. But you know, those beads were pretty intense because it came from the families. And you know, we had people that were deceased, or people that were winning, or you know, living, and people that were, you know, fighting for it. And you know, that was intense to do that. So I had this big ash basket. And so we got all the beads, and I was like, do you know what? They're all the same. We're not going to like, you know, treat them, you know, individually. So that was the hardest part. Nobody wanted to do it. So I got all the beads that came in with the letters. So I kept all the letters. I kept all the string.
And these were letters from family members donating the beads.
Yes, this is very heavy, and it was so heavy. And then we had to put them in the basket. So I just put all of them in, and I was like, now we're going to use these beads as a material, and we're going to make something that gets people excited that are coming in and out of that space. And yeah, this was my studio that was like in this like water tank room. I don't know if you see the plumbing thing on the side, and they put this big cage around it because it's like, you're not allowed to go near that like water plumbing thing. Yeah, over on that side. But yeah, that was like studio number 2. And then yay, this is a more recent photo of all of us.
I see some faces.
There's some faces
didn't know
here.
this was gonna be in.
Yeah, so this is a big team right now that we have in the Hochelaga studio. And we're just missing Virginie because she's on the computer all the time. And so we have Laurel, Christy, we have Ku, Iwana, we have Alex and Sam, and you know, it's been so wonderful like doing all these projects together, because it would be so impossible to get this work done. Like we're working on very large projects right now for Paris and New York, and it takes time. And you know, oh, you even got a shot of us working. Did I send that? I don't know. Yes, maybe I did.
On the
Yes.
internet.
Oh, yes. Okay, there we go. No, I sent this. Okay, so yeah, there's a little sneak peek into the studio, and you know, we're all sitting there together around, you know, putting good energy into the work. Everybody can come in to work whenever they want to, or whatever project they want to or feel comfortable with. Yeah, so this is like great. One time I ran out of coffee, and like Alex was like, I'm not coming back into the studio again. And I
can't work under these conditions.
And Alex actually works at home all the time now, but Alex is great. Yeah, true. Like sometimes they'll come in and they'll be like, hey, can I get beads and string? I'm like, sure, here you go, you know? But you know, it's just like, I'll show you the stitch, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's just great to have like all these wonderful artists like in the studio, all having different sort of, practices and different like things that they want to work on and ways of looking at things too. And, I hope that they're pulling things like from the studio and seeing how it happens and like applying it to their practice or being able to like, bring things and like how we'll handle or move things around or, there's so many layers to art and art practices, like you have like the curatorial team, you have like technicians, and then we have like the studio and like all these things that you don't necessarily talk about when you're looking at the work, or like the thousands of emails, you know what I mean? It's just like
And the file, the documentation,
The
keeping track, like your
documentation.
archive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that's a little peek in the Hochelaga studio right now. And then this work, we're just trying to like get like to see the size of like one of the pieces, so yeah, always fun stuff like that. It's happening. And then workshops. Yes.
Yes. So this was,
workshops.
yeah.
Yeah,
another
there's
one,
been so much. Yeah.
because
Wow.
the studio, like
This is
you can
workshops.
see like pedagogy happening, I think.
Yes,
also, but
absolutely.
then workshops is a big part of your work, but also
Mhm.
collective making that then feeds into work. So this slide gives some insight into the development of a piece from an earlier Nuit Blanche,
Mhm.
and how that has all the different stages,
This
different
was
pairs
like
of
a
hands.
cutesy one, yeah. Like it's like a more cute project because like the new ones that we're working on are very heavy in subject matter that we're working on. But this was like, I was teaching people how to do and make triangles, and then we were making something that nobody really knew what we were doing. And so I had to also think about, the drunk people walking by on Nuit Blanche. Somebody actually stole my phone that night. It was so funny. Yes, I put my phone down and then I was like, where the hell is my phone? And then yeah, so we had to call the person, and then the person was like, no, this is my phone. And I was like, what do you mean this? I was like, I'm getting you a cab right now and you're coming with my phone. And they actually got in this cab and came back to the location. And then they had the phone, and I was like, that's my phone. And they were like, no,
Prove it.
it's mine.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
but I got
extremely
my phone
fascinating.
back.
But you got it back.
Yeah, and so that was so funny. So I wanted to work with like a large material that people could, weave and not like worry about tiny little intricate things. So that's why we did giant plastic beads.
Weave or wear.
Weaverware,
Yeah.
yes.
How could I not put
Oh my
this photo
gosh.
in also?
Yes, this is so great. That's Kate. She's wonderful. She's the team lead of the CGB team in the USA, the Contemporary Geometric Beadwork team. And Catherine Shriver, I think, just got an award with them. Yeah, really cool award with them. We went to Linz, Austria, and we did a runway. Kate was like, she's always trying to think of ways to like, she's more interested in the mechanics of the beads and how they have all these wonderful possibilities. But she's always trying to think about, ways in which beadwork is experienced, and this was hilarious because it wasn't even done. And I was like meeting her on a thing and she's like, oh, just put the thing on your head. I was like, what? I was like, and then I put the thing off, like I put the object on my head. I was like, let's do this. And, what she's wearing right there is like a little like kaleidoscope-y thing. And, we got to meet like innovators of the bead practice, and the things that I learned there, I'm applying them to my practice now, and they like put me light years ahead on all the sort of wonderful techniques of the bead practice. And then I'm just looking at it a way to be like, oh, how can we turn that into like, corrugated cardboard? How can we turn that into bubble wrap? How can we do that sort of thing? Yeah.
That's an interesting anecdote of knowledge, like where knowledge is transferred. And, often
Yeah.
there's this separation of visual arts, fashion, design, but
Yeah.
through all these ways that you're exhibiting and learning with community, passing on knowledge, it's intermingling. And
Mhm.
you see that happening in your work as it's continuing to develop. And we're going to fast forward to the last slide so we can go into Q&A.
Yeah.
So the slides that I'm going to go over very quickly, we'll just put through on our Instagram.
Watch it be like 30 slides. You're like,
it's-
okay, so
No, it's only a few, and there's screenshots of like things that you're
Oh,
doing now. So
cute.
like workshops now at the McCord,
yeah, this is wonderful.
show up at Warren G. Flowers
Oh,
Gallery
yeah,
with
this is
Betty
great.
Muir
We
that
should go
just
see
opened
that.
last week.
Weird coincidence how it all works.
Right. So there's
Did you go
lots of-
see it? That's an
Yes.
accident. Do you
Yeah.
know that?
The
We
show,
didn't-
you mean?
No, like the work, like the colors, like
Yeah.
this was not planned. The star poems.
The writing is
it's
beautiful too.
insane.
Yeah.
I was just like, what the?
Yeah. So
Are we
these are,
psychically like, I don't know.
it started with
It's
the mot
perfect.
cachet, like it-
Yeah.
But these
This
are
is good.
opportunities to see Nico's work locally. Well, actually, sort of locally. This was the Radical Stitch show that we've been referencing from time to time.
It's
That
on tour.
started,
If you can catch it, go
Yes.
see it.
yeah, it started at
It's
Mackenzie, but
wonderful.
it's now
It's the
opening.
largest beadwork exhibit
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah. And how long is the drive since you just did it?
Maybe I'm like burnt from the drive. It was like I think 7 hours.
Yes.
I
so
stopped in
road trip.
Kingston and then poof,
Mhm.
yeah.
But oh yeah,
This is
coming up-
crazy. There's so many layers to this work. Actually, remember the oak tables?
Yes.
This is like, turning indigenous.
Feast
Yeah.
tables, feasting bowls. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like a porcelain with like a pattern of indigenous plants being turned into floorboards and staircases. Yeah.
Yep. So this will be opening up soon
and
at Centre
telephone
Clark.
poles.
And it's under the artistic direction of Sebastian Aubin and Carolyn.
This was
Monet.
amazing to do.
Yeah. And so here's like working with different materials, but the piece we're ending off is this one, coming up in March at the Phi Center.
Yes.
And I'm going to just go through a few images whilst you
This-
say whatever you
oh
want
my
to say about
gosh,
this
yeah,
beautiful piece.
This is like, we worked on this, like the team and I worked on this for a very, very, very long time. The whole thing unfolds and it's going to transform throughout the exhibition. I don't know what's going to be at the opening, but as you go weekly, it's going to be sort of folding in and on itself. Because I wanted to have a work that really, you see all the details, and even the inside is all corrugated. We got like the grease stain there. Like I was just trying to think, yeah. This,
I think I tried to get a detail of that,
oh,
but maybe
it's so, yeah, wow.
doesn't show up quite
Yeah.
so well.
So this work will be on view March 8th.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
March.
Yeah, the opening is there and there's a
Excellent.
wonderful group of artists there. Yeah, it's really cool.
All right. Well, that's the end of the prepared
I know, I'm looking at
slides.
the time. I was
And
like,
yeah,
oh my God,
I couldn't believe it was already.
I know,
7.
I know.
So we'll open up to questions, curiosities, discussion at this point. We have a roaming mic, which is me. So I'll come if you have any questions, but I also want to let the Zoom audience know that we have Grace co-hosting the Zoom space. So if you have any questions, please use the space of the chat and Grace will let me know if there's a question and we can bring it into the room here so that you can express that. So I'm going to leave you for a second whilst I roam. Are there any
No, just kidding.
questions or things to follow up on? Yes, I see your hand.
I was wondering, oh, sorry, that was really loud. For your piece stash bag, is
Yeah.
that also like kind of functional like this one? Like, does it kind of seal?
Yeah, it closes. Like it doesn't, you can stitch it closed, but it does close. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that something you'd be interested in trying in the future with like other pieces to have them like,
Yeah, I'm always trying to think, like the cardboard box was really hard because I had to figure out a way to like make it fold in on itself, which is like super tricky. Yeah, there's always like that fun part. That's the fun part of art making, is like figuring out that. And then once you figure it out, it's like, okay, I want to figure out something else new. Do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, cool, thank
Yeah.
you.
yeah. Any other questions?
Here's one.
As someone who is also compelled by the things that people leave behind. I'm just curious what attracts you to certain objects that you find.
Mhm.
So like between like, receipts or handwritten notes or, grocery items. So like what kind of
Oh, it
attracts you?
changes. Like I'll be in New York and I'll see something and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is getting beaded. Like there's like you see everybody using it, or you make that connection and then you think about all the layers behind that object. Yeah, I'm just inspired by different things. Or even like I went back home to London, Ontario over the break, and I saw like this other debonair that I had forgotten about, and trying to make a connection to that. So it's just like having I just get inspired by it. Like literally I took a picture of this, like it was like a fire hydrant, and I was thinking about all the water in the ground, and I made this work with this trickling piece on it with like shadows of birch and giving thanks. Yeah, so it just changes. Like I can't explain the object, lots of walking around, and then you're like, whoa, but also beadwork takes time. So like when you're working like forever on a piece, you're like, okay, I'm gonna make that in like 2025 for sure, 2026. Yeah, and like 2027, like it's always like thinking, it's like, if I did that, that would take till 2030. Nope. Do you know what I mean? It just changes with the object. Yeah. Yeah. Lots of objects. And then I can't stop when I get them.
I'm gonna do the wraparound. There's 2 questions here and then 1 here.
Okay.
Any from the Zoom? Ooh, wonderful.
First of all, wonderful talk. It was very insightful. I love your chairs. What kind of thread do you use?
I use wildfire. It's like a fishing line.
Oh, okay.
Thermally bonded. I love like right when you get a technical question, you're like, wait a minute.
So you could just buy fish line. It would be cheaper.
Yeah,
It's like practically
I
the
buy
same
giant
thing.
spools of it. Yeah.
So I know you probably wouldn't want to do this, but could you technically sit on those chairs, the beaded chairs?
It would hold weight, yeah, but the glass would probably break.
Oh
in
yeah,
certain
it would
parts.
have to be like maybe a very tiny person.
Yeah, I've been trying. I'm a very tiny person. I love it. You're like, can I sit on the
Can
chair?
I
Question 3.
Sit on your
Question-
chair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's
I
a good
love it.
question, like, especially
Super
with the
technical. I was
public.
like, wildfire, fishing line, all different weights. Yeah. Now you're good. You're like, what?
Thanks for that question, Javina.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hey.
thanks for your talk. I'm looking at these and I'm trying to kind of trace it back, and I'm thinking about how this language that you're so engaged in really comes from a kind of a lineage of, like, I would say Brian Jungian started. Not obviously this isn't, this is like a generational,
Yeah.
it's not the parallel is rich, I'm not trying anything derivative. But I was thinking how the shoes that were masks,
Oh,
that was the
yeah.
beginning where like indigenous work kind of engaged in like almost like pop or this kind of vernacular language, right?
Mhm.
And then there was a moment of kind of like almost cynicism with Sunny's work, Sunny Asu in some ways, where
Yeah.
the cereal boxes, and not cynicism, but there was a kind of an evacuation and then rebranding, let's say.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering, and I'm missing some artists in there who are working in the same lineage, but I guess I'm
Mhm.
wondering, when you do this work, like Brian's work was so rich because it was 50% shoe, 50% mask, right? Like they
Mhm.
kind of, they were iridescent, like they kind of went
Yeah.
back and forth. So I'm wondering, like, when there's an economy here too, right? That you're showing us with the boxes and detritus and
Yes.
lottery tickets, and there's a kind of and I don't mean this in a negative way, but there's a poverty almost.
Yeah.
So
I'm
I
like,
guess
these objects also represent indigenous people.
that's what I mean.
Like a thing,
It's not
like indigenous-
derivative
like
in
res
any way.
life.
Yeah. But I guess I'm wondering, so when we're looking at this box, and maybe this doesn't, like what happens in that transference? Like, do the
Mm.
beads become Amazon, or does Amazon somehow get implicated into another language or or
Yeah.
reverence? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Well, this
if you
work
could
was
comment
like
on
a
it.
little tricky because, you know, there was tape on the smile, and I wanted to go back. I wanted to do one more pandemic work, and I thought this would be like the final pandemic-y work. Thinking about that sort of comfort from digital, you know, wants and needs, like being like, oh, this and that. And it also has like sort of this soggy box color to it too, like it's been left out in the rain. And, you know, with this work, I was just trying to, you know, take the mask off. Like I looked at the work as animate. I want it to be animate throughout the exhibition, like it's a living work. And if I put tape over the smile, I was like, oh, I know it's so Amazon-y, but I wanted the smile to be there. You know, I want it to get people to sort of, you know, have an emotion to the work. I don't know, but that's what I was like going for. And I did like a 50-50 reduction with the piece where I was just like looking at, you know, how the text is. And it's so funny because when the picture was getting taken, Richard Max was like, made with less material. Do you know what I mean? But it's not like, it's not supposed to, it's just like a 50% representation of that. Do you know what I mean? I'm picking these objects because I'm inspired by them, you know, like even the cereal boxes, growing up in London, Ontario. So it's just like, you know, these things holding resources and shipping them around, like even driving back on the highway today, I was like, all these transport trucks, that's all of us. That's our, like, you know, that's our dishes, that's our food, that's our blankets, that's our, you know, weird Amazon orders in those giant tanks driving down the highway fueled by oil, you know? So I was just like, that's sort of how I look at this box. And then like little grease stain, it's like sort of like that, you know, greasy touch, like on the bottom and, you know, the tape. And it's just like looking at trees differently, you know, that was a tree and it's like sort of like this like temporary basket. So it's like looking at ways of how, you know, people from communities would make things that would hold, and, you know, like an ash basket, a quill box, a birch container, and hold things, and then sort of like a colonial take on it, which is like this temporary thing that we're just discarding constantly and we're throwing out and we're like, you know, yeah. But I love that it does say made with less material. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
Yeah, it has an emotion, doesn't it? Also because of its emptiness and its inertness, and maybe it will
Yeah.
be used, maybe not, but it's
Yeah.
emptied. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another question here from the audience, and then we'll finish up with the Zoom question.
Yep.
Is that okay, Nico?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, mine was very similar. I was just curious. The choice of objects, they seemed like you just seemed to say that all of them seem very colonial. They all seem to have a sort of power, especially the lottery tickets. And I was wondering if, like, when you're stitching this, the group is stitching it, if it's like some sort of act of sovereignty, if you feel anything like that, like kind of taking the power back from these objects, if that's like in your mind, or if it's really
Sort
just-
of. Well, I don't know. I think no, the connection to beadwork, it's very intimate. Like you get this relationship with it, and it's so hard to like, okay, so now I'm taking this and we're never going to see this again. Do you know what I mean? And then it's like going somewhere. And yeah, I look at like the work as like something really special. Yeah. I hope that answers it. I don't see it as like I don't know, I love the material, and yeah, you get a connection with what you're making. It's hard to detach it.
We have a question from the Zoom audience, Nico. It's from
Yeah.
Shelley Oyet, and it
Shelley.
relates to your team. So bringing the conversation back to a nice ending of
Yeah.
like the collective labor here.
Mhm.
So Shelley writes, thanks for a great presentation. Your work seems to grow in scale as you have a bigger team. the chairs, the shorts, the box. Do you see yourself moving more and more to large scale or like architectural scale?
Yeah, we actually have a large metal 12-foot beadwork thing that's with like metal poles and railings going through it, getting erected in May in Quebec City. That thing is giant. The beads are like the size of like, I don't know, they're about that size and they're aluminum. And yeah, I
There's
guess,
been some interesting testing in that process.
yeah.
Yes.
Did you see that?
Yes.
Oh, it's wonderful. Ludovic Boni is helping with that, and it's crazy. We are literally like beating a large thing. I can't say what it is
These
yet.
are almost the size of aluminum cans.
Yes, yeah. And
So I guess the answer is yes.
the materials have already quadrupled in price. Yeah, thank goodness we got it like way back then.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, that's
Oh
a
yeah,
real
no, it's
concern,
already 4
absolutely.
times the amount, and yeah. So I guess I hope that answers the question. I'm really trying to see where we can like move with beadwork into different spaces. Yeah, always, yeah.
Yeah, like the runway.
Constantly.
I know like other
Metal.
artists, like Catherine Blackburn has also been doing runway work.
Oh, she's
and
amazing.
runway,
Yeah, I
so-
was with her last night. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was a fun night. Yep.
Nico was missing the vernissage
Yes.
for us.
But I wanted to see you all and spend time with you in person. I was like, because I'm like in real life. Like if I was like zooming in, I was like, no, I'm coming, I'm driving down, Yeah. Yeah. And it's great.
Yes,
Yes.
it was. Can we have a round of applause for Nico, please?
Thank you. Need much.
So thank you so much for your generosity and your remarks, and also the trust of having this in a conversational mode with me. It was a real pleasure. Yeah. What's next? Oh. But I also want to thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for your time and contributions and energy in the room, and also to the Zoom space. I also want to thank Josh in the booth for all of your reliable tech support. And Karen Zuppiger and Etta Sandri, who also helps with the advertising. And I'm now projecting details on where the reception will be. We're teaming up with some wonderful hosts who are also in the audience, grad students from across different faculties, studio arts included, which Sika is very much connected to, but also art history, art ed. They have booked Le Frigo Vert, which is nearby, and there's food, refreshments. So there are some volunteers in the audience who will also be guiding us towards the space. Can we? Yeah, there's Nicole with the orange toque waving hands. So maybe, thank you so much. And Emily, so maybe we can have like a huddle in the foyer and then walk up in a minute or so, and we can continue the conversation with Nico. Thank you.